Chris Ferris Show. Welcome back to the Chris Ferris Show. We are excited again to have you guys with us. Of course, this is our 15-minute podcast to point you in the right direction to finding health and wholeness for your life. Today's subject is going to be an interesting one. We have had this conversation a lot of times, and every single time that we have this conversation, it generates a lot more conversation and a lot of questions. And it's one that we're particularly passionate about because we see so many people struggling with this. Today, we're going to be talking about how do you set healthy boundaries in your life? How do you set healthy boundaries? What does that even mean? And what does it look like? And so we're going to talk about some things that may create a little bit of pain and some friction and tension in you today. And that's good. It's not a bad thing. That's a good thing that we have that tension, those moments of tension. It's what we do with it when we feel it. But I want to just talk to you today and say a couple things. First of all, as we lay a foundation for this, there's some things that we need to understand about healthy boundaries, because I think there's also unhealthy boundaries, or maybe what we would call unrealistic boundaries, that probably are the leading cause to our frustration and the chaos and insanity that we experience within relationships, right? And so here's what you need to understand is that unrealistic expectations, unrealistic boundaries, unrealistic expectations are nothing more than premeditated resentments. Now, let that sink in for a minute. Somebody said that unrealistic expectations or boundaries are nothing more than premeditated resentments. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that it's like it's the breeding ground for resentment. It's like the number one cause to the resentments that we have is that we had expectations that went unmet. We all know what that feels like. We all know what that looks like. And so we want to talk about today, how do we move from these unrealistic expectations or boundaries to more realistic and healthy ones? But I will say this, the number one reason that people do not set or have healthy boundaries in their life is because they've never really been educated. They've never really been taught what a healthy boundary is. And so today we're hoping to change that. And we want to just give you some things about boundaries that will give you a good working definition that I think will help you in how you process this and how you move forward in your life. And I think most importantly, I think it's going to change who you allow into your life, who you allow to be part of your life. Because every one of us know, we all know what it's like to have that friend, that family member, that loved one, that spouse, that child who is constantly they're pushing the needle. They're just seeing how far they can go. They're constantly crossing boundaries. They're constantly interrupting our peace. For many of them, many people, they're just like ongoing emotional predators. And so we know what it's like to have those people in our life. And you know what's interesting about that is we get super upset with them. We get angry at them and we project onto them. But the truth is that it's our problem. It's our fault. If I allow someone to continue to violate me, continue to take advantage of me, continue to step all over me, that's not their problem. That's my problem. And so that's part of what this evaluation is. And so the working definition that we're going to give you today about a boundary, we want you to jot this down as you journal this out. Boundaries are nothing more than guards that we put in place to protect us and the ones we love physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we'll say it again. Boundaries, healthy boundaries, are nothing more than guards that we put in place to help protect us and the ones we love physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so here's what you have to understand. These are a good thing. Boundaries are a good thing, and they're a necessary part of life. I don't know if you can see above me my self-statement that I have right here. Was something that I had to declare and determine myself, my affirmation of self-statement that I had to declare a long time ago when I began this journey, all centering around boundaries, how I protect myself and take responsibility for me, for my emotions, for the ones that I love, the ones that are under my care, the people that I care for. And so it's just a way to protect us, right? It's a way to protect the ones that we love. And so they're necessary and they're good. But This is big. This is super important. A boundary without a consequence is no boundary at all. It's really nothing more than a good intention. That may be the most important thing that you get out of this 15 minutes, is that a boundary without a consequence is no boundary at all. It's really nothing more than just a good intention. So here's what that means. It means that a lot of us have what we think are boundaries in our life, and we think that we've set up, we've convinced ourselves that we've set up these boundaries, but the truth is that you haven't. And the reason that you haven't is because you've hollered things, you've screamed things in a moment of passion and anger and in the middle of a fight or whatever. You've said things and you've declared things, but you never really had a consequence in place. And so what I have is just a good intention. I'm hoping that you'll respect me, but here's the deal. People who have walked all over you in the past, people who take advantage of you, they don't have the capacity to respect you. So just because you say something doesn't mean that they're going to do it. They don't know what respect is. And so we have to evaluate our lives. We have to just take a moment. We say this often. It's that inventory, personal or self-inventory that we're taking, saying, do I have some areas of my life, do I have some areas of the life of my family where people are taking advantage, where they're violating us physically, emotionally, spiritually. They're coming against our family. They're interrupting our peace. They're disrupting and dismantling the peace of our home. Are there areas in my life where that is true? If the answer is yes, then that means you have some areas of your life where you need to set up some boundaries. You need to establish these healthy boundaries, and you need to do it quickly. You need to do it quickly. So I'm going to give you 4 steps here. We're going to take 4 steps today. There's some simple steps that you can take in helping to establish and declare these boundaries. So we're going to work from backwards, right? We're going to sort of reverse engineer this. And here's what we're going to start with. Number 1, we want you to know that in order to have a boundary, you need to start with the consequence. You have to start with the consequence. Why? Why does that matter? Well, because if the consequence is unrealistic, then the boundary is probably going to be unrealistic, which means you're not going to be able to hold anybody accountable to it. You're not going to be willing to hold somebody accountable to it. Let me give you an example. Just kind of silly example, but you'll understand. If my child, if somebody does something to me and they continue to do it over and over and over again, I've been guilty of saying something like this: if you ever do that again, I'm going to kill you. So here's the deal. I really don't have the intentions of killing somebody, which means I've probably declared something and I've put an unrealistic consequence at the end of it, because I'm clearly not going to kill that person and I'm not going to end their life for what they've done. Hopefully I'm not. If I'm going to do that, I've got bigger issues to deal with. But the point is this, that's an unrealistic consequence, meaning what? There's really no boundary. There's nothing there that you can hold somebody accountable to. So remember, an unrealistic expectation or an unrealistic boundary is going to be predicated on an unrealistic consequence. So start there, evaluate what are the consequences that I'm willing to put in place for the boundary that I need to protect me and the ones that I love. Is this boundary, is this consequence, is it realistic? The second thing that you're going to do, once you've declared or once you have determined the consequence and the boundary, once those are in place, now you're going to declare it to the people around you. You're going to declare it boldly and proudly. You're going to declare it to the ones who continue to walk all over you or violate you. You're going to declare it to the people that are in your life. Here's my boundary, and here's the consequence. Now, again, we're talking about healthy boundaries, and so this is a realistic thing for you. This is not an unrealistic thing. This is a realistic thing for you to do. Here's my boundary. Here's my consequence if you violate it. Now, why do we need to declare it? Well, because that puts the expectation now on the person that I'm declaring it to live up to it. I'm calling them into the conversation. I'm giving you an opportunity to be a part of my life, but here's how it's going to look. Here are the boundaries and here are the consequences. If you violate them, you do not get to be a part of my life. Meaning what? If there's a breach or a separation in the relationship, you didn't do it to them, they did it to themselves because they weren't willing to respect you or to hold that boundary and consequence in place. Do you see how this sort of flips the script and shifts the conversation and how we operate in that conversation? So declared bully. Then number 3. Here we go. Important. You got to hold them accountable. You have to hold people accountable to the consequence. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. In fact, I'm just going to tell you this right now. This may be one of the most difficult things that you'll ever do in your life is holding people accountable. The reason that it's difficult is because you love it. You don't want to come across as a jerk. You don't want to come across as somebody who is being unkind. But here's the deal. Remember, how somebody receives you. If they violated your boundary, that's not on you. That's on them. They've made the decision that they're not going to carry it out. You're just simply holding them accountable. But guess what? Accountability begins with you. Accountability begins with you. You have to be willing to hold yourself accountable to holding people accountable to the boundary. Remember this, people will not respect you any more than you respect yourself. If you do not have self-respect, people don't have the capacity. They're not going to offer you, especially people that walk all over you, take advantage of you. They're not going to respect you more than you respect yourself. But when you set a boundary and then you declare the consequence and then hold people accountable to that consequence, guess what you're doing? You're demanding through your actions, through what you've done, you're demanding that they respect you. Now, whether they do or not, completely up to them. But guess what you get to live with? You get to live in a constant state of peace and serenity. So you've got to hold people accountable. And then lastly, number 4, this is big. Choose to live principle over personality. Choose to live principle over personality. I can tell you from experience that when it comes to the people that you love, when it comes to the relationships that you're in, this is not always easy to do. What does it mean to live principle over personality? Well, what we know to be true is that in most cases, the emotions determine the destiny. The emotions determine the direction. We allow the emotions to steer the direction of the conversation, to direct our behaviors. It's all emotionally driven. When you're talking about living principle over personality, you're saying, I'm removing any of the personalities that may be involved in this. I'm going to let the principle make the decision for me. That's important. It's important because that takes away, in fact, the more principles, we say it this way, the more principles you have, the less decisions you have to make. It removes the emotional side. And so you're saying the principle is determining this. I'm not allowing your personality. I may love you, care about you, like you a lot. We're great friends. You're a part of my family, whatever. But your personality has become a violation, an interruption to our peace, a violation to the things of our home, my family, whatever the case may be. So the principle is this. I'm holding you accountable to the consequence. I'm letting the principle decide it, not what you think, not how much of a jerk you think I am, not how mean you think I may be. The principle gets to determine it. And so I want to say this lastly. Never, ever own the responses of other people. You have responsibility to your actions and to your attitude. You have responsibility to your own emotions. We tell our feelings what to feel. We don't allow our feelings to tell us what to feel. This is what it means to live a life of principle. So I want to encourage you to evaluate what are the areas of your life right now where somebody or other, there's a group of people or whatever, maybe more than one, is constantly violating, stepping all over you, taking advantage of you, interrupting your peace or interrupting the peace of your home. Take these steps, walk them out, and I promise you, because I've lived this out in my own life, in my own family, with my own friends, I've lived this out, and I can tell you, this is the secret to living life in peace 365 days a year. Because I've become a greater interruption to those who are interrupting my peace through these healthy boundaries, these realistic consequences, and me living by the principle I will hold you accountable no matter what. Receive this, guys. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. And it puts you on a new course, a new trajectory to how you live life in relationships. God bless. We'll see you next time.